Hello and welcome to the Grow Landscapers 10-minute business tips series, a show that gives you bite-sized nuggets of wisdom in just 10 minutes. I'm Nick Ruddle and today's guest is Will Cooke from Artisan Landscapes in Bristol. How you doing, Will?
I'm very well, Nick. Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Saw you on another podcast. Thought you'd be great value to the listeners on this one. So really appreciate your you accepting the invitation and coming on. So heard lots about you, seen lots about you, running a great business. And I'm sure you can share lots of pearls of wisdom with our listeners. So what I'm going to do, so no pressure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the timer on for 10 minutes, and
Yep.
then I'll ask you what your first tip is. So here we go. And so, what are your top? What's your top tip of your top 3 tips to begin with?
So it's not very glamorous, but it is vitally important if you are a business where your goal is for growth, and that's to build in processes and systems into your company as early as possible. At first, they may seem a bit over the top or unnecessary, but processes are far easier to implement when they're not imperative to the business's function or effectiveness. It's a lot easier to grow into a process than get so far down the line and think, what are we doing? How are we going to solve this problem? And then have to try and unpick everything. So it's trying to build in those processes as early as possible to not need them initially, or not need them in quite the same way that you may end up needing them, but to have them there and to grow into them. And it will help formulate the way in which you operate from the very beginning. So growth is, eventually you'll end up where you want to be. And that might be a certain size with a certain number of staff, a certain number of projects, a certain number of clients. And to have those processes in place will allow you to focus on the key things, addressing the clients and making sure that they're happy, keeping staff happy, and obviously profitability is key in all of that. And what you don't want to do is to be bogged down and saturated with having to unpick a sticky or complicated system or no system at all. So get those processes in place and think big when you're only small rather than the other way around.
Love it, love it, love it. Think big. Very, very good. Good tip there in itself. Yeah, 80-20 rule. 80% systemization, 20% humanization. That's our sort of rule of thumb. So 80% of the things that we do every day are repetitive tasks, either hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. But you need to humanize that. So you need great people running great systems.
Exactly.
But that's the rule of thumb. Brilliant, excellent. What a brilliant one to start us off with. Number 2, over to you.
So this is one that I struggled with for a while, but that is hiring people who are better than you. It took me a long time to come round to this. Like a lot of self-employed people, I've had and still have periods of imposter syndrome, which makes hiring people who are stronger than you are in your weak areas more challenging. It's key for your own personal growth and for the company's development to sit outside of that comfort zone and be educated by an alternative experience and skill set. It's a real challenge, especially when you're new to the industry. You've got to wear many hats. You're trying to do lots of different things, and you're not going to be great at all of them. When the opportunity comes around where you are hiring in people, you want to make sure that those people are fulfilling something that you can't do very well, to free you up to focus on the things that you are good at. Or if they are good at the things that you're good at, it frees you up to do something else altogether, which as businesses grow, it's to focus more on the business than it is the actual delivery of the product or service. So yeah, hiring people who are better than you. I wish I'd done it sooner, rather than sort of go, oh, I'm not experienced enough, or I don't have the knowledge to manage that person. But if they're good, then they can do that for you. They can manage themselves, and you're there to learn from them as much as you are to employ them.
Brilliant. Let's hope that saved a lot of other people lots of time by jumping on that sooner rather than later. But Richard Branson says the same thing. And if Richard Branson says it, then it can't be too bad.
Exactly.
It can't be far wrong. So, hire people that are better than you, because if you get involved, you actually make things worse. That's just sort of rule of thumb. So, let go of the ego. As long as you've got people you can trust. As long as you've got people you can trust, so you can hire them and trust them to do a great job.
Exactly.
Good stuff. Number 3, then over to you, Will.
So separately to the sort of what do we do question as a company, in our industry, it's landscaping, design, maintenance. It's establishing core company values and principles. If you're a founder-led business like Artisan, the company's reputation has been built by you as the owner-operator. Clients and customers would have dealt with you from the very first inquiry call to the completed project, wearing the many hats of the entrepreneur, office manager, landscaper, project manager. You'll still have a significant impact on the company's reputation, but as the team grows, your role changes, and it's vital that whoever joins the company represents who you are as a brand and carries that torch which you first lit. Performing the roles and responsibilities of the job and representing the values are two very distinct parts of being part of a team. And especially when you're working in a higher end of the market where there's high values of work, there's an expectation around quality. We're working with clients for an incredibly long time. So some are through much quicker, but it could be a year from first inquiry to completed project.
Yeah.
The end garden will be great. The journey getting there is a completely different thing, and that can make or break a project, and having, or even relationship with the client, and having those core values and principles that are commonly shared and known throughout the team, whether or not you're a designer or an assistant landscaper, gives that succinct feeling for the client all the way through, and will define your reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. Values underpin absolutely everything from the recruitment all the way through to what you live and breathe every day.
Exactly.
Excellent. Love the fact that you've highlighted values as one of your top tips. So a couple of other very short questions.
Sure.
First one, what do you think needs to happen to attract more people into this wonderful industry?
It's a challenging industry. I think it's important to, we touched on it before we started recording, like the wet weather, and it's a physical job. So you go into the industry loving it. You get to work with your hands, and it's creative, and you create spaces which are incredible for people to enjoy for many, many years. They're projects that we're putting into people's forever homes, but it's still a challenging industry. And I feel that raising the industry up and stepping away from some of the more public mindset of landscaping is something that anybody can do, popping out into your garden and putting in a few plants, or having a go at laying some paving, is something that many people that are experienced with DIY can do. But there's a difference between great landscaping and having a go. And in turn, by raising the industry above where it's currently at, and I think we're on a really great projection for the industry. It's getting better and better and better. But with that increase of notoriety as a trade amongst all the other trades, you can then justify some of the pricing, and in turn you can increase wages, because I do feel that landscaping on the whole is not fairly reflected in the wages for where other trades that you can go in, because you have to do so many things. You've got to be a carpenter, a paver, a block layer, there's just every trade there, and you've got to be great at all of them. And more clear progression routes, I think, is really important. I think you can become quite stagnant in landscaping. You reach a certain point and you have a decision to make on whether or not you stay in that role or you go and start on your own. And not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody wants to run their own company. It's it comes with a lot of positives, but it's also risky, and it's a balance of time and family. Some people love it, but I think more clear progression routes within companies to understand, if I join this company, where can I get to, and what does that journey look like?
Yeah, clear, defined career path.
Exactly.
And the wages are going up, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
With everything else going up, it needs to be affordable as well, doesn't it? So it's a fine line. So final question to you then. You obviously run a really good business. What do you personally do as a business owner to improve your knowledge and keep growing yourself?
Yeah, listening to podcasts just like this. I think it's it's important to hear other people's experiences. Like, you've got to understand that you're not in it alone, and everyone will have a similar experience and a different outcome. So I think, yeah, being able to hear other people's experiences through things like podcasts and YouTube, social media is great. There's a lot of generous people on social media, Els being one of them, you know, where you really get a peek behind the curtain about what goes into being a landscaper, and that kind of, you know, sharing those skills and those experiences are really important. Chatting to people in other industries, this has been one that's definitely helped me. It's like you can live in a bit of an echo chamber on the flip side of everyone having similar experiences. If you can have conversations with other business owners in other industries, you'd be really surprised at the crossovers and how they may have dealt with other challenges that you can take inspiration from or advice from to help with. And that's really helped me, is just, you know, talking business in general rather than specifically about landscaping. And then the final one for me is just putting yourself out there for challenging projects. You know, like the reason we've got the portfolio that we've got and the work that we do and the awards that we've been lucky enough to win is by taking on projects which we knew were going to be risky, at no risk to the client. You know, we're working on fixed prices, and, you know, we're going to make sure that the project hits that quality and make sure the client gets the service that they want. But as a business, we're going into it going, we haven't done this before. This is not a material we've worked with. This is a landscaping technique that we've got no experience with, but weighing up the risk, like what's the worst that can happen? Well, the worst that can happen is that it might not be a financially viable project, but the cost of that is the learning. And the next time we go into a project like that, we'll have the experience. So it's really stepping outside your comfort zone and being sensible about it. You don't want to be cavalier and gung-ho and put the business in jeopardy, but you've got to go into things with a bit more, you've got to be comfortable with risk and be able to learn from those experiences.
Yeah, have the courage to do that. And
Exactly.
sometimes you got to sort of fail your way to success. As long as it's not, as long as you can live with the downside, then
exactly. It's sort of controlled failure is the way to do it.
But as long as you do take the lesson and you learn it, you don't repeat it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. That we are up on time, so really appreciate your help. Stay on afterwards. I'll say goodbye now, but I'll say goodbye to you properly in a second. But really appreciate those
Thank you very
wonderful tips.
much.
Thanks for your time and effort. You really put some thought into that. I can see, and I see you've written a lot down. So you've packed so much into this 10 or maybe even 11 minutes now. So appreciate your help. No listeners, we're going to get lots and lots of great value from that. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll catch you soon. Take care, Will. Cheers.
Bye-bye.